Welcome back! In this video, we're going to be talking about making inferences in informational text. Before we make inferences, let's do a quick review of what informational text means. An informational text is factual writing that informs a reader about a topic. Informational text provides facts and details. They'll often answer the questions of who, what, when, where, why, and how about a topic. Informational texts often include photos, captions, and subheadings, which help the reader know what is coming next. Let's take a look at the text that we're going to read today. This is an informational text titled A Scientist's Search for Bigfoot by Tetsuo Fuji. Dr. Jeffrey Meldrum is an associate professor of anatomy and anthropology at Idaho State University. He specializes in primate foot structure, a category that includes apes, monkeys, and humans. His interests also include evaluating footprints that some claim are left by a mythical North American ape known as Bigfoot. Meldrum's laboratory houses more than 200 casts and artifacts relating to Bigfoot. Although he believes that some samples are hoaxes, others interest him, such as unidentified hair and a unique casts of muscles and foot bone anatomy. Before we delve into this text and make some inferences, let's make sure that we understand what the word specializes means. The word was used in the text when it said, Dr. Jeffrey Meldrum is an associate professor of anatomy and anthropology at Idaho State University. He specializes in primate foot structure, a category that includes apes, monkeys, and humans. Does Dr. Meldrum study all body parts of primates? No, it tells us that he studies the primate foot structure. The first sentence tells us he's a doctor. So we know that he's a doctor studying the foot structure of primates, not primates as a whole. This helps me understand what the word specializes mean. If you specialize in something, you focus on one type of work. Dr. Meldrum is specializing in foot structure. Think about when you go to the doctor. My daughter broke her arm skiing. When I took her to the doctor, I had to take her to an orthopedic surgeon. An orthopedic surgeon is a special type of doctor that works with bones. So when you specialize, you focus on one type of work. Synonyms for the word specialize are to concentrate or to focus. So a doctor concentrates on the foot structure or focuses on foot structure. Now that we better understand that word, let's take a look at our passage again. We want to make an inference about Bigfoot and a scientist's search for Bigfoot. Remember, when we make an inference, we're going to be a reading detective. We're going to use our background knowledge, everything we already know, plus our clues from the text, what the author tells us, to make a good conclusion or a good judgment about the story. Here's our article again. Now, we're going to make some inferences. We're going to use what we know and clues in the text to answer why is Dr. Meldrum most likely interested in the samples that are not hoaxes. Let's think about this question as we're reading this paragraph for a second time. Dr. Meldrum thinks some samples are hoaxes, but others interest him. Why is he most likely interested in those other samples? Let's see. Dr. Jeffrey Meldrum is an associate professor of anatomy and anthropology at Idaho State University. He specializes in primate foot structure, a category that includes apes, monkeys, and humans. His interests also include evaluating footprints that some claim are left by a mythical North American ape known as Bigfoot. Meldrum's laboratory houses more than 200 casts and artifacts relating to Bigfoot. Although he believes that some of the samples are hoaxes, others interest him, such as unidentified hair and unique cast of muscles and foot bone anatomy. We said we wanted to think about Dr. Meldrum thinks some samples are hoaxes, but others interest him. Why is he most likely interested in those other samples of Bigfoot? Well, we know if we're going to make an inference, we have to start with what we know and add that to what the text says to make an inference. So let's start with what we know. We know that if a scientist is interested in something, he or she, excuse me, let's try that again. We know that if a scientist is interested in something, he or she might think it has scientific value. That's why they're studying it. We also know that scientists might keep samples that could lead to a discovery. We know that scientists are collecting things so they can make discovery, especially when they're talking about Bigfoot. So those are things we know. Now, what does the text say? Well, one thing the text said was Meldrum's laboratory houses more than 200 casts and artifacts relating to Bigfoot. Can you imagine that? Bigfoot casts and artifacts. So his laboratory houses over 200 casts and artifacts or items relating to Bigfoot. What else does the text say? The text says, although he believes that some samples are hoaxes, which means made up or made believe, others interest him, such as unidentified hair and unique casts of muscle and foot bone anatomy. So we know that others interest him, such as unidentified hair and unique casts of muscles and foot bone anatomy. Notice, because this came straight from the text, we put our quotation marks to say we took these words right from the text. So the text tells us that part of his samples include unidentified hair and unique casts of muscle and foot bone anatomy from Bigfoot. So let's take what we know, that scientists will often keep samples of things that are interesting to them and they think will have scientific value that could lead to a discovery. Plus what we read in the text, we know that Meldrum's laboratory has over 200 casts and artifacts relating to Bigfoot. Some of them really interest him because they have unidentified hair and unique cast of muscle and foot bone anatomy. So we know that scientists keep samples that could lead to a discovery. And Dr. Meldrum has all of these samples that he's kept. So why do you think he's most interested in these specific samples, the unidentified hair and the unique cast of muscle and foot bone anatomy? Well, typically if a scientist is keeping those things, he's hoping that it leads to a big discovery. So we could infer that Dr. Meldrum is most likely interested in the other samples because he thinks it's possible that some of his Bigfoot-related samples are authentic or real. So he's interested in these specific samples because he's hoping that he can prove Bigfoot exists. What do you think? Do you think Bigfoot is real? Dr. Meldrum is working to prove it. Let's keep reading. Many anthropologists criticize Meldrum's work. They feel he's trying to find an imaginary creature that exists only in folklore. Meldrum tells critics he is not saying that Bigfoot exists. He just believes that there's enough evidence to justify scientific investigation. Unsurprisingly, most anthropologists reject Meldrum's evidence. Dr. David J. Dangling, a University of Florida anthropologist who thinks Meldrum's methods of analyzing data are unscientific, sums up his feeling. Meldrum's evidence doesn't look better on deeper analysis. It looks worse. All right, let's take a quick peek at some words. I noticed this word, unsurprisingly. This has a prefix that we've talked about before. Un means not. So unsurprisingly means not surprised. So not surprisingly, most anthropologists reject Meldrum's evidence. The closed reading says, what do most other scientists think about Meldrum's work? Underline the sentence that tells how they feel. Over here, it says, they feel he is trying to find an imaginary creature that exists only in folklore. So they don't necessarily believe the work that he's doing. Let's look at our question. Which sentence from the account best supports the idea that most scientists do not find value in investigating Bigfoot's artifacts? A. Many anthropologists criticize Meldrum's work. B. They feel he's trying to find an imaginary creature that exists only in folklore. C. Meldrum tells critics he's not saying that Bigfoot exists. Or D. He just believes there's enough evidence to justify scientific investigation. Which choice gives evidence of what most scientists think of the Bigfoot research? Our best answer is B. They feel he's trying to find an imaginary creature that only exists in folklore. We know that this is the best answer because it explains why scientists find little value in investigating Bigfoot artifacts. Now, this one was a little tricky because I was confused between A and B, and I had to look closely at my question. The question said, which account best supports the idea that most scientists do not find value in investigating the artifacts? A says many anthropologists criticize Meldrum's work. This tells us that the anthropologists are critical or are finding things wrong with Meldrum's work, but not necessarily that they don't find value in it. They can still find value in the work, but just not agree with how he's doing it. So that's why B is a better choice, because it tells us exactly that they feel he's trying to find an imaginary creature that exists only in folklore, meaning they don't find any value in what he's doing. C says Meldrum tells critics he's not saying that Bigfoot exists. It gives us Meldrum's response to the scientists, but it does not explain why scientists find little value in investigating Bigfoot artifacts. In D, he just believes there's enough evidence to justify scientific investigation. Tells us that Meldrum thinks or believes, but it doesn't tell us what the other scientists think and believe. And that's what the question asked us to do. So B is our best answer. Keep on being good reading detectives and making inferences as you read.